This is the Fifth Estate winning headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 17th of October 2019, and I am 2J.
I am JM.
And I am GK, and in case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, battle for Fidel's riches jolts Raila family. In the Star, Raila family row, court rejects Ida's plea to gag media. And in the Standard, a country for old people.
Interesting.
Very interesting headlines.
Yes, so maybe we take the Daily Nation and the Star together,
Yes.
both discussing Raila's family.
Yeah, I thought these
absolutely.
headlines would have died, but I guess if you tag Raila on the headline,
Yes.
people are bound to pick it.
So the context here,
Yes.
for the sake of the viewers, is that the Fidel's widow is being challenged in court. Ida and her daughter went to court and said that there's two children that Fidel had,
Some twins.
who were born about 6 months after he died, and they should be included in the estate.
Yeah.
And so they've gone to court about it.
Yeah.
And that's basically it.
So the Star has taken a different angle in that
Yeah.
apparently they wanted to be in the private. They wanted to gag the media from reporting
From
on
discussing it.
Exactly.
which has essentially gotten them 2 headlines.
Yes, it has, which is quite interesting because,
Yes.
as you were saying,
Yeah.
initially when they went to court to file these proceedings,
Yeah.
they went and they did it through open court. So they said that they wanted it to be in the open court hearing.
Yeah.
However, the judge is saying that if they wanted to gag the media, they should have first and foremost done it through a closed court proceeding, which is what they failed to do.
Yes, and so
Absolutely.
would they have hired a lawyer who doesn't know that they are in the public eye,
Now
and
that
therefore
is
this would raise
So
flags?
you're
That's my
asking,
biggest
so you're
question.
asking the cui bono question. Who
Exactly,
benefits
yeah.
from all this negative press
Negative
for the
press.
Raila family?
It's a 30 million shilling estate. Is it making Raila look petty? There's
Yeah.
something going
It
on,
is.
and it's not sitting.
It doesn't
well.
add up. Who's driving these headlines? Because as much as we know about the Raila family, they have enough money to hire, as you said,
Yeah.
a lawyer competent enough to tell them,
Yes.
if you do not want the public to know, take this route.
Yeah.
If you want the
Absolutely.
public to know, take this route. So
Fair
for me,
enough.
it seems a bit
Yeah, although I do
strange.
feel, and like we said with the Star yesterday, they are entitled to some privacy in
Completely.
this
They
are,
family
they are.
matter. But
Yeah.
then when you add politics to
on top.
this is
The voters
and,
get a
and,
bit
and
money.
the Odinga family has sacrificed so much for this country, so much.
This is
It's
Yeah.
an
true. They
incredible
deserve
amount.
some
They-
respect.
very
They
true.
don't deserve this kind of bashing.
Yes, a little respect.
This kind of exposure.
So here we ask who is
But yeah.
benefiting from
These headlines.
these headlines. But we also have a 3-part criteria that we use to break them down. We ask ourselves, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy?
I think it is speculative across the board because while it is still in court, we do
Yeah.
not know anything. It's a lot of he said, she said, you know,
Yes.
information that is coming out of court.
Yes.
We have no right to talk about it.
One more thing, guys. Yesterday, the president was somewhere launching SGR.
Yes, and the Daily Nation has put a little
Precisely,
picture.
right? To Suswa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, that didn't even get any coverage
Yes.
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Instead, they chose to post these very
Personal,
pessimistic,
yeah.
personal headlines.
Yeah, and this
Honestly.
has been a
It's a
big
shame.
feat, especially because SGR has gotten some bad press, you know.
So much
it's
bad
been too
press.
expensive, blah blah.
Somebody yesterday called the Nairobi to Suswa a train to
to nowhere.
nowhere.
Absolutely.
And I
Very
think that's
pessimistic.
so unfair.
Here's what this is what someone had to say when they launched the Lunatic Express.
Yeah.
This is the Kenya to Uganda Railway back in the 1900s.
Yeah, Sir Elliot or something.
Yeah, Charles Elliot is actually the commissioner of British East Africa at that time. And
Yes.
he said it is not uncommon for a country to create a railway. But this line, that line, the Kenya-Uganda one, actually created a country.
A country,
Yeah.
yes.
So these people who are saying that this is a railway to
To
nowhere,
nowhere. They're not seeing the
Obviously.
vision.
Yes.
They aren't. Yeah.
That in
They're
this move, we're opening up a new frontier.
precisely,
To-
we're
most
building a
definitely.
nation.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
and
on-
that's what ought to have been on the headlines.
Most-
For
Yeah,
the Daily
for sure.
Nation as well.
So I think we toss these.
I think we toss them for being pessimistic,
Off you go.
speculative.
In the
What do we have
Standard,
here?
a country for old people. So here we have in the aftermath of Mary Wambui being appointed as
Yes.
the National Employment Authority.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I think Senator Sakaja Johnson was part of
The group that
yes, that enacted and brought in this employment authority, and the idea was to have huduma centers where people would come, youth would come, register their details, and then they would be deployed to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so a lot of people are anti this because they think she's too old or doesn't have the energy to do this.
There is nothing wrong with old people at all. And okay, so I'm conflicted because on one hand, I absolutely love the headline. It's a play on a movie entitled No Country for Old Men. So I think it's a very fantastic play on words.
Yeah.
However, I take issue with the fact that what's wrong with having elderly people lead us in some of these institutions? There's absolutely nothing with it. I would say, why would we waste the youth on some of these jobs, right?
Okay.
Jonathan, I would never make you the chairperson of the National Employment Authority because I would be wasting your good talent
You need
on
him
such
on
a
the
position.
ground.
Because
I need
we
you on the ground.
We only meet once or twice a year.
Exactly.
To do what? Approve board meeting minutes.
I
I would
also-
actually want to be on the secretariat.
Exactly.
Or something like that. That's where young people would have a
Using your
chance
energy,
to make a difference.
All
But
right.
also, I think President Kenyatta is wise in appointing the older generation to lead us, because sometimes I feel like the young people of today, they're hungry but for the wrong reasons. So they get in there, they don't understand the politics, they get caught up in
that tenderpreneur life.
Precisely, the tenderpreneur life, and you end up
just trying to
embarrassing
make it.
a whole president, a whole government. So
So it makes political sense for him,
does.
for his legacy.
precisely.
And there's some political capital maybe and I think as Africans we cherish our elders in terms of the wisdom that they might give. So maybe that's where he's coming from.
I think the tone is a bit pessimistic, so I wouldn't necessarily consider it a winning headline. I don't know what you.
I think that if we were to purely follow our criteria,
Yes.
it ticks it across the board. It
quite
is such
catchy.
this is strange. Third day in a row, the Standard has had fantastic headlines.
Doing really well.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it had a more, it's sparked a debate amongst us, and
Most
I'm sure it
definitely.
sparked a debate with other people.
Yeah.
So I suspect we should give it our winning headline.
Yes.
And
Just
and
cautiously.
All right.
and hope that they take a positive spin on this. Onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, where we also have a 3-part criteria that we use. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And is it effective or just plain lazy?
Guys, Gado is back. He
Gado is
emerged
back.
from whatever hole he was in.
You are on a very long leave, but welcome back. So here you have, he's drawn a picture of, I guess, Sonko, a caricature of Sonko, with his hat not on top of his head, but in his head you can see an iPhone or a phone, some chicken bones.
Fish bone.
Just say it. It's full of rubbish.
It's full of trash.
Yeah.
And it says, much obliged, now benchmark that. So this is in context. So he gave a speech, I think yesterday, when they were launching the JKIA Westlands Expressway. That will link all of Nairobi. And he asked the president to intervene and dismantle the cartels that are in Nairobi County. And he's just come back from benchmarking some European cities, so I guess that's the play on benchmark
on the
that.
benchmark.
I think it's an alright cartoon. Let's look at what else is going on before we make
But
a
I
decision.
want to say this, guys. Sonko actually won some award for, it was an urban early warning initiative to assess food insecurity levels. That's what he won from the Milan Pact 2019. So as much as we want to focus on the negative, there is
some positive.
Some
I don't know if we
positive
should
out there.
attribute it to Sonko himself, but yes, Nairobi County won an award.
well, we can put it there for now.
All right. And what do we have in the Star?
Yes.
Right. So in the Star, we have a coffin. With 2 compartments. The first half, the top half, is Kenyan elections setup, and it's basically a ballot box. And then the second half is basically now the coffin with a body in it, presumably, and a cross on the top. And then you got blood flowing. This is in Malindi County. And so the context here is the violence that broke out in, I think it was actually Kilifi County. And here's the context. So the MCA for Ganda Ward in Kilifi County, a guy by the name Abdul Omar, lost a court case that challenged his victory. And so that seat fell vacant a few months ago.
So there's a by-election.
And so there's a by-election. It's actually happening today. And the campaigns ended officially on Monday. But the ODM aspirant, a guy by the name Ruben Katana, held a meeting on Tuesday. He says he was meeting party members, but it was actually apparently a meeting of about 500 people. And so Aisha Jumwa... Potential voters. So Aisha Jumwa gets really upset.
She gets wind of it.
Because now they're campaigning beyond the time.
Yes.
And so she storms into his house, into his compound, and a fracas ensues.
Yes.
And the
Bullets start flying.
Cops get involved,
Yeah.
bullets start flying, and Ruben, Katana's uncle,
yeah.
ends up being shot in the shoulder,
Wow.
and he dies,
Wow.
unfortunately.
And this is the cause of her arrest.
And this is the cause of her arrest.
Yeah.
And this cartoon is basically tells us that elections in Kenya breed violence.
They breed violence, and I think we
Very
can
sad.
firmly say Aisha is no longer an ODM, or is
Definitely
Yeah, would
not
appear
an
she
ODM.
isn't.
were
Yeah, she's
speculating-
running as an independent, right?
Yeah, absolutely. She was campaigning for
for
the
the guy,
independent
yeah,
candidate.
candidate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a good one. It's an effective one.
Yeah, it's a chilling cartoon. I think
It is. We
park
park
it.
it for
Okay.
a bit as we consider.
On that note, can I suggest that we toss the standard? As much as
Yeah.
we missed Gado, we're happy he's back.
Yeah.
Toss it. Yeah. So what do we have here?
So here we have a baby caricature of Akuru Alcott.
Yeah.
And the baby is being thrown out with the bathwater. And it says, "This is not what I meant by Punguza Mizigo."
Yeah.
It's a bit confusing for me.
Okay, so first of all, the context here is that officially we can say that Punguza Mizigo has failed to meet the 24 county threshold.
criteria, yes.
And so now we are throwing it out.
Yeah.
But when you use the pun to don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, the assumption is that the baby is something valuable. You want to throw the bathwater out because it is dirty.
Yeah.
Precisely.
So who is the valuable thing in this?
Is it Alcott or is it the...
Or it's Punguza Mizigo, I don't know.
I think Punguza Mizigo it ought to be the valuable thing here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
The positive aspects of that bill.
Yes.
But
But then now we've thrown the baby.
The
which
baby,
is Akuru.
yeah.
And remember,
Oh, no.
he's been accused a lot of not having sort of getting everyone to the table and agreeing before presenting his table.
Yeah.
So, presenting his
I
constitution.
mean, Dula is one person who I believe understands puns very well, but this has been over punned. I think he got a bit confused in what he
Shall
was
we
trying to say.
toss
toss it.
We toss it.
Okay,
unfortunately.
so we have a winning cartoon from the start, from Ozone. What is our final thought?
Yes, of course, our final thought, again in continuation in the run-up to Mashujaa Day. Today we want to look at Kenya's freedom struggle, the Dedan Kimathi Papers, and it is a collection of papers written by Dedan Kimathi and other Mau Mau people, but it was edited by a person called Maina wa Kinyati in 2009. So I'm not actually going to go through a lot of the history of Dedan Kimathi, but just some few tidbits.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people know this, that when Nelson Mandela came to Kenya in 1990, just 5 months after he was released from prison after 27 years, he came to Kenya to see Dedan Kimathi's grave because he'd heard about these Mau Mau fighters and he wanted to know about the people who had inspired him in his own South African independence struggle.
Yeah.
So he came to see Kimathi's grave, and lo and behold, there was no grave. And he said, okay, can I meet his wife? And his wife was actually living in poverty in Nyeri.
Yeah.
So the Moi administration at that time were very embarrassed.
They should have been.
Yeah. And the other interesting thing
And so they
is
declined. They actually
yes, they declined. Yeah. He did come
Mandela's
back.
request to meet her
Yeah, he did come back years later, and he was able to meet her, and they had put together some kind of haphazard gravesite.
during the Kibaki administration.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the other interesting thing is that the government of Kenya officially removed the Mau Mau off the terrorist list in 2003.
Why did it take so
It
long?
took so long.
Gosh.
And then they eventually honored Dedan Kimathi as a national hero in 2007 when they gave him that copper statue.
Wow.
So I think it gives us a lot of insight into how brainwashed we became and in our failure to understand the people who liberated us.
Yeah, to understand and to appreciate.
As well,
Yeah.
exactly. And so this book is an attempt to combine some of the original texts and documents written by those who participated in the Mau Mau struggle. So Dedan Kimathi, I think we can all agree, is one of the political and spiritual leaders of the Mau Mau movement. And as an individual, he strongly believed that part of the work that the Mau Mau did should be documented constantly and preserved for future generations to have and understand. And because of this, Kimathi insisted that every single guerrilla commander write a monthly report of activities, keep a report of the meetings, the minute meetings, and also make note of the expenditure. So if you actually look in the book, you see some of the expenditure. They said that in this year they had 2.4 million. By the end of the year, they had 400,000, and they say that they had an excess of this. It's very detailed,
Very organized,
that they kept. And so Dedan himself as an individual also he had a habit of writing down all his observations of the struggles. And he believed that these documents, and I'm quoting him, these documents will be concrete evidence that we fought and died for this land. And so to preserve these historical documents, an underground archive was established in the Nyandarua forest in 1953. So it was actually sent to the Kenya Parliament. Is that what they were called? What did they do?
Kenya Parliament. So
Yeah.
Kenya Parliament was the governing body of the Mau Mau. It was sort of the way that they legislated,
Yeah.
where the documents were sent. They sent memos, and you'll see that as we do our sections on what exactly the Kenyan Parliament would be about. But it was
Exactly.
basically a way of showing that they were capable of governing should they get independence.
They were not just a ragtag
Yes.
group of people,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so in 1953, they send all these archives to this forest in Nyandarua, and they have these men there to protect it as well. And I think that some people say that this could be considered as Kenya's first true national archive. However, in 1955, a KLFA turncoat takes the British forces and leads them to this archive, and they seize all the documents and letters which were in Kikuyu, in Kiswahili, and in English. And the British then took these documents, they translated them, they indexed them, and they turned them into 14 volumes, each 30 pages long, and they titled them the Kimathi Papers. So that's about 420 pages total of letters that were collected.
Wow.
And they eventually sent them to the MI5, which is the intelligence unit in the UK. They sent it to the London Public Records, and then they kept some here in the Kenyan colonial offices. But none of these were made public. And so Maina, the author and editor of this book, he argues that there may be two reasons why the colonial government were hesitant to make these things public. And he says the first is that these documents confirmed the heroism of the Mau Mau movement and the support that Kimathi had amongst the everyday Kenyans.
Yes, yes.
Two, it also exposed the brutality of the British government, something that we know today. And two, these texts describe the British and their Kenyan collaborators. And he quotes Fidel Castro as saying that these texts would expose the collaborators in terms which they actually deserved and with words that could not be erased from history. And interestingly, Maina also points out that the independent Kenyan government, upon our independence, collaborated with the British government to continue to conceal these documents under a joint British-Kenyan agreement that ensured that the documents would not be made public until 2013.
Gosh.
Yeah. And so you're seeing that these texts, these letters, these documents were made for and made by thousands and thousands of unnamed Kenyans who joined together patriotically to fight for the independence of this country.
Yeah.
And so this book, I think, begins to undo some of that anti-Mau Mau sentiment that we might have to really, prove that it was a good cause.
I really enjoyed reading it, and in the section I read, it was letters to Kenyan Parliament. So the people in the forests and the reserves, they would write to the Kenyan Parliament, which is this governing body, and they would say things like, listen, I need you to mediate. There's a commandant who's come into my area, there's insubordination going on, or this person I've sent supplies to this person and they've not brought them back, or things like that. So, for instance, he would say, all the battalions and their commanders were documented, which meant that you couldn't just join a movement. You had to send these your details, your ID, your location, where you're from, who your relatives are, and then you would be approved and brought into the movement, which showed just how organized they were. There was also tactical and strategic dissemination. So when the land forces were being decentralized, a memo was sent out and you were told, okay, this is how you will organize yourselves. And they would say things like, or rather, Ded and Kimathi would say things like, divide the army into smaller units as larger camps will be easy targets for the British forces. He would also recommend people to join the army. So for one instance, he recommended a woman. And this is what he says. Her name was Hannah Wamoyo. And she says, she's an educated and intelligent girl. She loves her country and her people very much. Although many educated women can't be trusted nowadays, Wamoyo can be. And so she was trained as a nurse, and Dadan saw, you know what, we can pull her into the movement and help her organize the hospitals. And then there were letters of encouragement. So especially after big losses of lives in different areas, he would say things like, bad luck sometimes falls on people. So people like General Kago, who was fighting to liberate Murang'a district, was sent lots of these little pep talks, and he would say, the British talk of democracy, but is it democracy when hundreds of our people are sent to the cemetery for wanting their independence and land back? So he advises General Kago, keep fighting the good fight, right? Or even when General China surrenders. So yesterday we talked about how General China surrendered and people were like, he betrayed. And Dadan did not mince his words, right? He was like, if China thinks I will mortgage this great struggle to save his life, he must be crazy. So he was very emotive. Reading these letters shows you a whole other side of Dadan Kimathi. The last thing I will say is when he's ordering books. So they would write these lists and they would send them off to the people who could buy the books in Nairobi and places. And he was very into omens and dreams. So he would often write about letters and say, listen, I dreamt about this. What does this mean? Right? And he would order, for instance, Napoleon's Book of Fate, Universal Dream Book, Dreams and Omens, and How to Live for 100 years. So he was very curious about what his
there's a
dreams
dream
meant.
he writes about in the last chapter of the book where he says he was taken into a prison camp. Then the Mau Mau people came to take him out of the prison camp. He goes back into his hut and he finds 2 British soldiers and he hacks them to death.
Kills them.
Then just before he's about to go out and speak to his people and be applauded, he wakes up from the dream. And he says, what does this mean? And I think it's so ironic because that's how his life ended. He was never able to see the struggle till the end.
So these letters went back and forth. So in this section, there's letters to the Kenyan Parliament, but there's also letters from the guerrillas to Dedan Kimathi, just showing how much they appreciated him. So even the picture that the British then painted of him was so false in terms of people really
he was loved,
cared about him. But I think JM has a different...
He was also brutal.
Yes.
Well, first of all, he was a man of remarkable leadership abilities, as you have mentioned. And he truly deserved the title of Field Marshal. Field Marshal is the highest rank that you can obtain in any military organization, and it's a title given only in wartime. When you have earned the right on the battlefield to lead people, lead campaigns,
organize
people, communicate with them, and he did that in a very spectacular way. And it's probably why then his capture in 1956 signaled the beginning of the end of the forest wars for Mau Mau, because he was really holding this whole thing together. Right? And he did that very competently. So he was both loved, but he was also feared in equal measure, right? And some historians say that his affinity for wanting to be feared is actually what led to his downfall. So as you may recall, Machiavelli says it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. What he should have done is to attempt to be both. But he was quite brutal. And he was a zealot. He was fanatical, uncompromising about the fight, about the struggle. And so, for example, he believed that all Kikuyu men of a particular age should be oathed into Mau Mau, and those who refused would be hacked to death, right? And then the mothers of those who have been hacked to death would also be hacked to death.
Wow,
a ridiculous thing. And then there were the oaths that would be administered by him, and they were also very severe and disgusting. And people also refused to do these things, and once again they were killed. They were killed. So that brutality then got a lot of people to become informers and to basically sell him out, to defect, right? Now and that's the other thing, defectors. And this is the last thing I'll talk about. The letter from General China after he was captured to
asking them to surrender
to him.
To
Absolutely. And so General China, as you know, entered into negotiations with the colonial government. And the colonial government, when they were interrogating him, asked him, so why don't people desert? Why don't people surrender from the Mau Mau? And General China said, these guys fear Dedan Kimathi. They fear his brutality. They will be killed.
Mau Mau or death.
Absolutely. Right? And so basically in this letter, he sought direction from Marshal Kimathi on 2 items actually. Whether a peace conference was possible and whether it was a trick, because the British were trying to get the Mau Mau to get to get to surrender. And here's what Field Marshal Kimathi said. He said, call for peace negotiations was a trick. It's a trick. And he said that because in August of 53, they had actually had a ceasefire so that they could attempt to negotiate for surrender. But while they did that, the British government ended up, killing his best soldiers. And so he lost faith in that process altogether. And he said, if
we're to meet with them,
if we were to surrender, he said we have 3 unconditional demands. The first is that the British government disarm its forces unconditionally, it release all political prisoners, and it recognizes Kenya's independence. And I actually believe that if they got a chance to lead this country, they could have done so competently.
Maybe we would be in a completely
different
Kenya.
Who
knows?
Right?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's so
there's 2 sides to every story. story there.
Absolutely.
So on a day where we had a winning headline from the Standard with a caveat that it could be positive, and a winning cartoon from the Star, I want to say this. Dedden said, work very hard for the people. Work without fear of death, for we will all die one day. Besides, to die for one's country is to live forever.
Wow.
And surely Dedden lives forever. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can find us on TV. We're on GoTV, Pang Free to Air, and Star Times. Have a good evening.